Hello and welcome to Charity's Treasures. I have been working all week, so that's why I have not had any episodes, which is why I'm going to combine Music Monday and Definition Tuesday today. Okay, are we paying attention to the role of spirits which reside in the pre-existence? Who are they? And why is their role important in understanding the plan of salvation and God's purposes? Before I start the episode, I just want to tell Zach Costello that I have a lot to say to him tomorrow in my episode. Don't worry, I'm not going to yell at you like I did Candace. Quite the opposite, actually. You are doing wonderful things, and I think you are very in tune with what Charlie wants you to do, and that's exciting to me. You brought up some things this last week and a half, that made my mind light up and understand some things I did not understand until I watched certain episodes of yours, which I will explain tomorrow. I have a lot of good things to say that I hope will help you and me, and I have some advice for you and a perspective that will hopefully enlighten your mind. Okay, just wanted to get that out so you can look forward, because Zach is listening to me, I'm sure, and to my episode tomorrow, which is all about Zach. Excuse me. Since I don't have Candace Wednesday anymore, I might as well have a different person, right? Okay, so our song is still Amazing Grace, and this is the second verse to Amazing Grace. And I will go, as I go through this episode, you'll see how it relates to this verse. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. In a recent episode, I shared that I received a blessing when I was in the Billings Temple that told me I was foreordained to serve in the Billings Temple at that specific time. This indicated to me at the time that I was on the path that was mine, and that I agreed to live before I came to earth. And it was as if God was confirming to me that I had, up until that point in my life, done all that was required so far, and that the choices I made were all the choices that I needed to make to get that blessing that told me I was foreordained, which was also indicated to me in that blessing. So, what is our definition? Foreordained. So, Amazing Grace, second verse, foreordained. And there's a bunch of different aspects to this definition. You can look at my Substack, but I have a lot to say today, and I don't want to just spend a bunch of time on the definition. But I will say foreordained is something that is decreed, appointed, or decided in advance, making it destined or inevitable. It describes a predetermined outcome or purpose, often associated with fate or divine planning. It signifies that an event, person's role, or outcome was set beforehand, often implying fate, destiny, or God's plan. Okay, so that is why in that blessing I felt the way I did. Okay, so keep that in mind. Amazing Grace, second verse, and foreordained as I go through today's episode. Okay, today I'm going to tell a couple stories. I was not going to tell these stories because one of the stories involves someone else, but the Spirit has been prompting me all week. And even though I've been trying to ignore it and go against it, I eventually must be obedient. So the person I'm involving, and these stories I have, so the person I'm involving in the story is a big part of the reason why I do listen to the Spirit. A long time ago, he involved himself in my life knowing that I was a little bit crazy. So it's kind of his fault that I'm sharing the story today. And hopefully it's okay, because God is telling me to do it and I'm listening to the Spirit. Okay. The pre-existence. I have felt all week to share these two turning points, because Music Monday is Definition Tuesday is about sharing turning points, remember? Or was that Music Monday? I'll have to go back and look. I can't remember now. Okay. I've been so busy all week. So I have felt to share these turning points which intersect. It is a personal experience, and I wasn't going to share it, but it keeps coming up into my mind to do so. I cannot get it out of my mind, and how important it is to share these stories. I realize after thinking about it for this last week, the reason I must share these stories is because it combines those beyond the veil who have lived and died on this earth and those who have not yet come to earth. A lot of people in the world think that our church is weird because we believe there's a pre-existence where spirits dwell before they come to earth and inhabit bodies. Why people think this is weird boggles my mind, because it's the most natural thing in the world to me to think that this must be true. Like, it just makes everything perfect, right? The whole plan of salvation. If God is forever, then so are we. He created us. As I talked about at the beginning of the year, life is one eternal round. And when I talked about the song, If I Could Hide to Kolob, I talked about how everything is eternal. We are eternal beings. Everything has value and everything was created from something else. Last week, I talked about the importance of recognizing the dead and how they can help us in our life on this earth. I have been talking about Charlie. I've talked about Scott. I have talked about my nephew Jet. I have talked about my grandmother. All these people died and are now on the other side of the veil in the spirit world. Last year, I talked about people I went to school with who had died. All these people lived on the earth and died. I have, in my podcast when I first began, talked about the pre-existence a little bit. I don't remember what episode that was, but I talked about it. And I think it's important to incorporate experiences that have to do with the pre-existence as we go about learning more about the gospel this year and who the spirits are beyond the veil. It's not just those spirits that have died. Okay, familiar stories. I have shared a couple experiences the last 3 years in increments in my podcast. Some at the beginning of 3 years ago, some in the middle. And if you have been following me for a while, what I say today might be familiar, but if you haven't, then it might be new information. I'm going to combine these experiences and share the rest of the story. I have mentioned before that when I began my high school years, I didn't always make the best decisions. Well, I mean, if you think about the decisions you're supposed to make as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, if you think about the world and the world's decisions, then, I mean, I would just fit into the world, I guess, in some respects. Not totally in the world. I was still a good kid, but anyways, I would go to church every week, but I eventually stopped going to the temple. I did not attend seminary on a regular basis, and I stopped being involved in youth activities at church. Okay. I was his responsibility. Oh, sorry. My nose is running. Okay. As this was happening in my life, that boy who saved me when I was 5, which I mentioned in last week's, I think, one of my episodes. I don't know who saw that. Not a lot of people watched it, so you might not know what I'm talking about today. So you might want to go back and watch that. It seemed... the boy that saved me when I was 5, it seemed, recognized those times when I was struggling to stay on the path, that he could see that probably I should have been on. Throughout my life, that boy who saved me when I was 5 years old continued to save me as I grew up. I feel, as I look back on that whole beginning of my life, I feel and understand that I was this boy's responsibility. And I don't know if he realized that as we grew up, but I kind of feel like he might have. I feel like he understood that he had some sort of responsibility to keep me on the right track, to keep me on the path that would lead me to my destiny, which was to follow God, right? And we both pretty much understood that that destiny included us being together. At least we thought so. I understand now that this was his responsibility and his purpose in my life. I was his responsibility at that time. I have come to understand this truth. Him involving himself in my life was him fulfilling his priesthood responsibilities. He was a good boy. This boy was a good boy. Now, this boy was always a very good boy. And he was always a good example of what it meant to follow Jesus Christ. And not just for me, but for those at our school. He was a great strength to me throughout my high school years. What I realize now looking back is that he always knew who I was and who I was going to be. He had a perspective and insight about who I was that I did not have, which is why he kept trying to save me by encouraging me to get on the right path. He would do this by always inviting me to places, church activities, seminary, and other things that were going on at church. I'm sure I was a big frustration for him because he could see what I couldn't see. I got a little wrapped up in the world, but he never did. As I always look back on that time, he has always continued to be a strength to me, even when we departed our separate ways at times. His care and concern for me has always been something that helped me propel forward in my life and gospel journey, especially during the difficult times. Our senior year, I think we finally decided that it was time to get together. There was definitely a lot of flirting going on, something we never really did before that year. I don't remember us ever flirting with each other. There were many times when we almost got together that year, but it was as if there was some divine intervention, creating circumstances that didn't allow it. It was frustrating and kind of difficult to understand why, but I knew after he got off his mission that I was going to marry that boy. He knew it too. Years later, I realized the divine intervention that came, because if we had ever gotten together in that way before his mission, even divine intervention probably wouldn't have been able to keep us apart. It was never in God's plan for that path to be experienced. It was in God's plan to have us understand that experience years later and understand why we had to experience it. He was supposed to keep me on track, and that's why God put him in my life. He achieved that role. He did his part. He showed me what love looks like. After graduation, this boy and I were at church. After church, we decided to exchange graduation presents. As we were walking to his car, I was thinking in my mind, Charity, this is the moment you can share how you feel about him. You can let him know what has been going on in your mind. I was thinking that this is finally the day where we can express how we feel about each other. After arriving at his car and exchanging presents, those thoughts were on the tip of my tongue, and I felt like they were on his too. In that moment when we could have shared how we were feeling all this time, it was like something came between us. Like something physically came between us. This something seemed to be preventing us from sharing our thoughts and feelings and saying what we wanted to say. So we ended up saying nothing. That there was just small talk and about what's going to happen now. School, a mission. Then we walked away from each other. We were both going to different colleges and seemed to be going in different directions. My first turning point was when I was 5 years old. My second turning point, I fell asleep. After graduation and before summer ended that year, I had an experience. I was going to attend Montana Tech, but I had not found an apartment yet. I was working in Butte and still living in Whitehall. My brothers worked at Pizza Hut in Butte, so they got me the job there. I was working the night shift one night, and it was like midway through summer. For those of you who are not familiar with the road from Butte to Whitehall, it is very twisty. There are many turns, and it's high on a mountain. And there are many areas where if you went off the mountain, you would fall into like a canyon in many places that is like 100 to 200 feet below the highway. The night I was coming home, it was pouring rain, and I was really tired because it was after midnight. While I was driving and rain was pouring down, I fell asleep. I do not know how long I was asleep, but I do know that I was on one of the twistiest parts of the highway when I did. I must have been in a deep sleep because I woke up as I heard a voice speaking to me and felt someone shaking me. even though I was in the car alone. At this time in my life, well, at least I thought so. At this time in my life, I did not really recognize the Spirit and how it speaks to me. I was not close to the Spirit, and I did not have a really close relationship with God or Jesus Christ. It was not until years later that I understood more about this experience and the Spirit that was sent to wake me up that night. Anyways, I heard this voice, and I could feel someone shaking me. The voice was saying, "Charity, please wake up. Wake up, Charity. Wake up." I could feel that I was being shook in order to have me wake up. I woke up, and when I looked at what was going on around me, I noticed that I was still on the road. I had no idea what had just happened to me. I was so confused. I did not know how I was still on the road because it was like the twistiest part of the road when I woke up, and I was afraid because I was thinking, how did I not go off the road? Why is my car still on the road? And I was like, I thought I was alone, and I was. I looked around my car and I was thinking, what? There was someone here, but now they're not here. I was so weird. I had never experienced anything like that in my life. I could not comprehend what had just happened. I arrived home, and later I just sat in my room just thinking about the situation and experience I had just experienced. For the first time in a long time, I thought of God and his importance in my life. I remember talking to him that night. It had been a long time since I had even prayed. In this moment of reflection, I thought about the scriptures. I had never read the Bible. I had never read the Book of Mormon. I would read verses here and there in Sunday school, but I've never actually read a big part or the entire book. I looked on my shelf and saw the books on my shelf, and I took them off the shelf. I realized in that moment that I needed to read the Book of Mormon. The next morning, I was talking to my mom about the experience and telling her that I need to read the Book of Mormon. I told her that I need to understand why I didn't die that night, the night before, and go off the road. She gave me a study guide to read the Book of Mormon because I did not know anything about the scriptures. I finally found an apartment in Butte, and I began reading the Book of Mormon and using the study guide when I was in Butte. After a few months, I decided that I wanted to get my patriarchal blessing. I received my blessing, but I still didn't completely turn my heart to where it was supposed to be, which was to God, right? I was still a little bit wrapped up in the world. That night that I fell asleep, I was saved. Amazing grace, by God's grace. This was the first time that I remember fearing God. It was the first time that I feared that maybe I wasn't on the right path. I understand now more fully that experience was God's grace in my life. Him showing me his grace by saving me, by sending someone to save me. That night was a turning point of belief for me that God was real, that he sent someone to save me who was seemingly unimportant to the world. Why would I need to be saved? I understand now that I needed to be saved spiritually, but I was also saved physically. I should have driven off the road and into the canyon where 100 to 200 feet would have been my fall. Okay, sorry, my nose is running. My third turning point, the boys' farewell and homecoming. A year later after this experience, I went to the boys' farewell. And after, I knew that when he came back, I was going to marry him. He knew it too. After a couple years and some letters, he came back. I went to his homecoming, and we scheduled a time to meet. That day, after pondering and praying about it, I felt that I had an answer. I did not understand why that was the answer, and I don't think he did either. But after talking for a while, I knew I had to walk away. We still did not express all of our feelings to each other. There were so many things we said and so many things we did not say. We didn't say what would have brought us together that day. I was walking away. As I was walking away, pain filled my heart. I felt like I was hurting that boy. As I was about ready to open my car door to leave, I thought to myself, Charity, what are you doing? Why is this the answer you're getting? This boy has tried to save you your entire life, and he succeeded. Why are you walking away from that? In that moment, I thought, I don't think I can walk away from that, even though I had received an answer. So I turned to go back to him, to tell him the things I was really feeling. And halfway around that turn, I felt this light push, and I heard a voice say, please, Charity, don't turn around. At that point in my life, I still wasn't so close to the Spirit and understanding how to recognize the Spirit. I was still really in my spiritual infancy, almost like a baby in many ways. I realized years later that that voice was the same Spirit that told me to wake up in the car. The same Spirit that said, please, Charity, wake up. Charity, wake up. Then, through the Holy Ghost, I heard God say, Charity, this path, if you turn around, would make you happy, and your life would be full of joy. And this is your choice to make. Then, that same Spirit that nudged me to turn back to my car and open the door, who seemed to be standing in the path that would lead me back to the boy, said, Charity, before you came to earth, you chose a path, and this is not that path. Please open the door and get into the car. I turned around and got into my car. That voice was so convincing, even though I did not fully understand what was happening in that moment. That Spirit who talked to me those 2 times was not alone. I can see now that that Spirit was not alone that day, which was confirmed to me this last week. I can see and understand as the years went by that this Spirit in the car and in the path back to the boy was from the pre-existence. And the spirits that were with him that day were also hoping I would get into the car. Where were the spirits that were with him that day, which I didn't realize then that they were also there, were my future children. Maybe even the children of that boy, even though I don't know that for sure. But I do know that my children were there that day. I can recognize, as I have gone through all these experiences in my life, that there was probably more spirits behind the spirits of my children, my nieces and nephews, who in that moment knew that besides my mother, I would be the only one that would help them see the gospel light. I've talked about the spirits of the dead who have died, but there are spirits that have not yet come to earth who also have an influence in our lives. They too want to be acknowledged, heard, and seen. I have come to realize that the spirits on the other side with Charlie, Scott, and my grandma are spirits that help me in this life. But there are also spirits in the pre-existence that also hoped for me to make the right choices that would benefit God's kingdom by helping people understand the spirits of the dead and the spirits who have not yet lived, as I was told in my blessing. My responsibility on this earth is to bring all of these 3 realms together. This experience was given to me so I could do that. Not only are there spirits of the dead depending on me, but also the spirits who have not yet lived and want to live on this earth. I am going to talk a little bit more about that in the coming weeks and the pre-existence so people kind of understand what that means. That spirit that saved me. As I have been thinking about all these things this week, sorry, my nose keeps running, and about that spirit that saved me in the car and that asked me to go back into my car and drive away, that it was the same spirit that was intervening in our lives our senior year. That spirit was in the parking lot that day when we exchanged gifts. I haven't felt that spirit since that day I got back into my car. But in those 2 moments, those 2 turning point moments, that spirit was obviously there to help me along the path that I chose to follow before I came to this earth. After that spirit left me, I chose to go away from that boy. I chose the path that I chose before I came to this earth. All these thoughts made me think this week about how God lets us choose. He shows us a possibility and lets us know if that possibility is good or bad. And many times we think that He's the reason we choose or don't choose. We think He's telling us to go in a certain direction, when maybe that could be true, but maybe sometimes it's those spirits ministering to us on the other side, pushing us this way or that way because we are a part of their plan too. Our decisions affect their lives. Maybe our decisions affect their lives more than it affects God's life. So He sends them to us to influence us one way or another. In this sense, we can't really blame God for our choices because God told us to go this way or that way. But maybe we can blame those spirits in the pre-existence and in the spirit world who minister to us, guiding us in this direction or that direction, because God allows them to be instruments in His hands. And maybe we make choices because of them and the influence that we are supposed to have on their life. My children wanted me to be their mother, and I believe that boy's children wanted his future wife to be their mother. Charlie's turning points. As I think about this experience, I think about all the choices and the turning points that we have in our lives. When I chose to turn away from that boy, I chose a more difficult life, even though at the time I didn't realize it would be difficult. In many ways, there are some that must choose more difficult paths. I think of Charlie and him having those dreams, knowing that they would come to pass if he continued to be part of Turning Point and that he would die. But he knew what his purpose was. His purpose was to follow Jesus Christ, and he knew that that was where he would have the most opportunity to share what he knows about Jesus. And at the same time, he knew that he was going to die young by doing it. But he chose the hard path. He chose the path that would lead him to die young, and he knew it, and he kept following it. One thing I realized about this boy is his righteousness and his desires for me to follow good roads protected me. He did the job that was required. I will be forever grateful for that boy taking me on as a responsibility. I imagine it wasn't an easy one to take. I imagine the choice that Charlie had to make and the turning points that he went through were not easy ones. Yet, we always, when we are obedient to God because we love Him, keep making those hard choices. I can look back and see, even when I didn't understand the Spirit and how God speaks to me, I was still obedient. I still had faith in what I couldn't see. And that is my message today. I will talk more about next week about spirits in the pre-existence and their role and their importance in our life, so that you guys who don't understand can understand, because I have realized this last week how important that topic is. And so that's all I have for today. I will see you tomorrow, and that will be a lot about concerning Zach Costello and some of his episodes. All right. Bye, everybody.